So, a while back, someone brought up in the comments of a video if I was watching Magia record, Puello Magi, Madoka Magica. I think someone gets paid by the letter for working on this show. Anyways, I'm sorry if I didn't get back to you, or if I did get back to you, I'm sorry I forgot that I got back to you. I actually was watching this at the time. But considering it is a Madoka Magica property, you're probably better off waiting until its big twist happens for you to decide how you feel about that show. And with that big twist and this show over for a few weeks now, I think I've lamented long enough and feel like I can properly talk about it. But before we get into that, let's talk about Madoka Magica just as a franchise and my thoughts on it for a few minutes. So the original show from like 2011, I actually thought was fantastic. Really interesting, really well done, until it wasn't. And it takes a left turn into what the fuckville and falls flat on its face in a way M. Night Shyamalan can only dream of. Yeah, I obviously have a very unpopular opinion about how Madoka Magica goes. But a couple years later, it got a sequel movie to hopefully finish the franchise off. And most people hate it, but I actually really like it. It gives me the sort of strange ending I think a show like this should actually have. But once again, I'm in the minority. So yeah, then they wanted to do a fourth film. They made a concept trailer for it, and that seems to have gone nowhere. But then, because of course they did, they made a gacha game of Madoka Magica. That's right. You can collect all these cute, lovable human sacrifices and watch them be tortured and be miserable. Fun for all. And naturally, because this game got popular, it got a anime adaptation, which is where we are today talking about said anime adaptation. And well, does this show stand on its own? Is it a proper successor that embodies everything everyone loves while fixing what went wrong? Is it truly good? Well, that's kind of a complicated question. And I mean it this time. This is actually kind of a weird show to judge. I mean, it's a great show to talk about and to think about, but let's just get right into it. So this show picks up in a slight spoiler for Madoka Magica, a alternate timeline that Homura had created during the twist I didn't like, where this girl, generic video game protagonist, she's a magical girl. She's protecting her city. She's pretty good at what she does. She's kind of an oddball to her classmates. She starts noticing something. She realizes that her little sister is missing. She somehow had all her memories erased of her. All her friends and family have her memories erased of her, and she can't even see her sister in pictures she's clearly in. And so she decides, I gotta figure out what happened to my sister, which eventually leads her to this crazy city full of super powerful witches and super cool magical girls, all of whom seem to have designs a little more sexual than last time. That's a little weird. But anyways, so she goes to this city, and most of the show is her going on little adventures with different magical girls, trying to get clues about her sister, trying to uncover weird conspiracies, and also protect people from the powerful witches that inhabit this city that is attracting many a magical girl who believe that this will lead to their salvation. And you know what? When this show was being different and original, it really fucking worked. First up, let's talk about just the whole sort of tone and atmosphere of this show. So since this show isn't hiding that it's got a dark, twisted inner side to it, it can sort of really start playing with things early. Like, when you realize the sister is missing, it's not just, oh, my sister's missing, I gotta go find her. There's this very sort of kind of scary, eerie atmosphere to it. Like, our MC is slowly realizing that her mind has been messed with, but it's not like this simple generic stuff you get in a lot of shows. It's this very, like, creepy realizing her mind is not all hers. And I thought that was actually really well done. It was quiet, it had a nice atmosphere to it, and that sort of stays throughout the show. Like, from episode 1 to episode 13, it's always uneasy. You're always kind of wondering what's real, what's make-believe, what's there, what's not. This is accomplished through some very good music, some fantastic animation, and just more importantly, just kind of really being able to utilize everything early. Nothing's being hidden, so everything can really be brought out to you immediately. And that leads to some really great fights with the witches as well. There's more action in this show than in the original, and it rises to the occasion fantastically. The blending of the CGI and the hand-drawn is so perfect and spot on here, you really can't even tell, and you don't want to because every fight is creative, every fight is different. This is the advantage to having so many witches and so many magical girls, is that you constantly are being given new elements, new ideas, new powers, and it leads to all in all some very entertaining action, maybe the best of last season. But yeah, that's all really good. How are the characters themselves? I like them. I like them quite a bit. The MC is a letdown, and the one who's clearly a Homura clone is also a bit of a letdown, but the rest are very interesting. They have very well-defined personalities, and you always get to learn their backstory. You always get to learn what led them to becoming a magical girl, and I think the show does a good job of keeping everyone feeling different and interesting and unique. I won't say any one character ever gets as interesting as the Sayaka stuff, which, as many of you probably know, was my favorite part of Madoka Magica. None of it ever reaches that level, but nothing about these characters is ever not intriguing, and I never not want to continue on their journey. Although, like I said, it is weird their magical girl designs seem to show off a lot more skin and belly button. But yeah, no, so that was really good. And I like the fact that it wants to be different. There's a very strong desire in this show to be its own unique thing. And I think whenever it was being that, when it was just being creepy and having a lot of tension, I think it really worked. Unfortunately, though, at many points it doesn't. And we should probably talk about why it doesn't. First up, there's of course the weakness of having it that you essentially are a video game adaptation, and that is, you gotta go through the video game's levels. Which means that the show is basically divided into 4 or 5 mini arcs where they just go take on a different witch each time, and while I said a lot of that is interesting, it does make the show feel disjointed, and like the journey getting to our endpoint was more just kind of random and not really well built up, or at least as well as I think it could have been or should have been. Also, the thing with the sister doesn't really go anywhere. It's called a spoiler, but it really doesn't. So yeah, and also, you know, the cliffhanger ending might bug some people, because we don't know when another season of this will come, and Madoka Magica has a history of being inconsistent, but the real sort of issue, and this is where the show gets complicated, is that because the show wants to be its own thing, and be unique, and be different, means that it's sort of doomed to not be able to do a lot of its most important plot points right, because a lot of the show still has to revolve around stuff from the original. It still needs to do all the big twists that revolve around why the magical girls exist and what they're actually about. It has to do all these things, which means that you're no longer in the original storyline, you're in... Well, I mean, originally, you're not in this storyline. You have to deal with the original stuff, which, depending on how you like the original stuff, will affect your viewing. I personally thought they did a very good job, especially with the twist I didn't like. When it was addressed, I thought they did it in a way that made sense, but I could definitely see it being a problem for people. They also do this thing, they bring in a couple characters from the original Madoka Magica, and they're just kind of there. They just sort of exist to remind you this is the Madoka Magica universe, and it's just kind of like, why? Why? And they don't do anything with anyone till the last episode. And the thing is, since we know this is an alternate timeline, you can do stuff with the returning characters, and they don't. They do it in the last episode, but it's the last episode. And on top of that, when you get to what the main plot is, it's just sort of thrown at you. It's just presented all in one big scoop, and it's like, season's over, come back next time. And that's kind of how it ends. So it sort of ends on this weird, awkward note. And while there is some great stuff there, and I'd be really fascinated to see what they would do with this in the future, like I said, we don't know how long we have to wait. And also, we don't really know if we can trust Madoka Magica because there are so many polarizing twists in this franchise. And it does sort of make me want to be excited, but also want to be a little nervous. So yeah, and also because it's an alternate timeline, there is also no stakes, which means that this will all just stop when Homura does another time loop. And yeah, they didn't really do enough to justify existing in an alternate timeline. This isn't ReZero, where it's just not afraid to get as crazy and fucked up in the timelines that will be erased as possible. It just kind of was like, this exists and we need to keep stuff of the franchise being this franchise. So yeah, if I were to say, should you watch this show? Well, if you're a Madoka Magica fan, you probably did. You've probably been chomping at the bit for that fourth movie. You probably already have the game and are probably playing it as we speak. I actually downloaded it. I haven't started it yet, though. So yeah, you probably did watch this, and I am very curious to see how actual hardcore Madoka Magica fans really think of this show, because I am genuinely curious how it goes over for them. If you are not a Madoka Magica fan and maybe just wanted to try an anime that looked a little bit different this past season, I think you can still enjoy it. I think that enough of the original stuff really works, but I do think when the stuff from the original show will show up, it will be distracting. But I think if you're properly warned about Madoka Magica, which you probably just know through osmosis of being an anime fan, I think you can still do this. Overall, I think this was a very interesting little experiment that did enough right for me that I personally really liked it, and I definitely will go forward further, but the things that don't work are really distracting and really get in the way. So yeah, middling show about a pretty middling franchise. So yeah, that was Magia record Madoka Magica. Tell me what you thought about it in the comments below. Are you excited for a season 2? Are you nervous for where a season 2 could go? Do you like the game? Do you want me to talk about the twist I don't like? Because I feel like I could end up getting a lot of comments being like, fuck you, if they don't know what twist I'm talking about. But yeah, tell me about that below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me in a year or 5 or 10 when this show gets a season 2.